Okay. I am so glad to be on this evening, and we're going to talk about some difficult subjects this evening. I appreciate the Marsh Tacky Foundation hosting me to do this. We're going to talk about some tough things, folks, but I think you're going to hopefully be more at peace with some of the difficult things that we have to do when we have our horses and we love our horses. It's the greatest gift to your horse, to yourself, and to your veterinarian. And if I make it through this whole presentation without crying, that would be a first. So we're not going to worry about that. Ah, so big things here are you are in control of your horse's life ending. Now, for some people, I'm sure that's terrifying, but in a way, it's a great thing because you get to make the decisions and you get to make them right. And what's really funny is, as human beings, I mean, all over social media, I see people planning their weddings and their retirements and their graduations and their gender reveals for their brand new babies. And, funerals these days have become much more of a fun event. It's more of a life celebration than some miserable religious, you know, death toll or something. We've changed our attitudes about those kind of things, right? So we've got to change our attitudes about our animals too. And planning that last good day for your horse, if you fail to plan, that's also a plan, right? So we want to get it right. We want to think about what are the things that we're in control of and make that plan ahead of time so that we can do all the good things and have wonderful memories of that. The very first thing that I'm going to tell you guys is, in my opinion, selling your horse to an auction or selling it to the quote little girl down the road that's going to love your horse and have it forever is just not what you need to be doing. This is a very good example from the Marsh Tacky Foundation. This is Whiskey back in May of oh sorry 2026. I got the number screwed up, but it took 21 days from his first sale to a person to pulling him out of a kill pen, and they were able to save him. What's the status on him right now, Patricia?
He is doing really well.
Yay.
We've checked his back. Ginger's done rehab with him. It showed that he's got some kissing spine, I believe,
Hmm.
and he
May
had
never
some.
be rideable.
Uh, we're working on it. It
Yep.
it seems like it's something that's going to be manageable right now.
Good.
We're seeing how far it's going to go. He had swollen SI joints
Mm.
and things like that. So it makes sense he was yeeting people.
Yes. And
I would
that's sort
be.
of what happens. Yeah, I mean, pain results in behavior, and sometimes those behaviors are scary to people, and so they move the horse on. But we know that those kind of things end up with horses that end up in places we don't want them to end up. And
Yes.
we don't want to do that. So what we want to do is step up and be responsible and make some decisions and think about those decisions ahead of time. It's always easier to think about them ahead of time when you're working through it with someone you know or a friend or someone that can give you good advice. I'm going to try to be that friend to you tonight. It's a basic decision point. We always tell people, do you value quality of life over quantity of life? Until the last 100 years or so, we have always valued quantity of life. And, you know, uh, we just lost Dolly Parton. And, she was 80 years old. And a lot of us at this, I'm like, only 80? I mean, I'm so used to people living to be 90 and 100, right? My dad made it to 88. And I was shocked. I was like, what? So we often value quantity of life, but also quality of life. Dolly was lucky. She had wonderful quality of life until the very end and had lost her husband. So that's sort of relevant to what we're talking about tonight, right? Making those kinds of decisions. There's a lot of information. If you take a look, there is a book, Fraser's The Behavior and Welfare of the Horse. I've got a chapter in that book, and it gives you a lot of information about behavior and welfare that some of you may be interested in going to more depth. I don't get a kickback from that book. I just wrote the chapter, but I do think that it was well worth reading. So a point about that whole quality of quantity of life thing is, when you introduce a horse, Do you notice that you always use, hey, this is my so and so and he's this old, right? Why do we think that is? Some of it is horsemen. That's part of our identification of a horse. How we ID our horse. Sales value is obviously tied to age. Although, Patricia, have you noticed that most horses are 10 or 15? They're never 11 or 13 or 17. They're always
Yes.
10 or 15.
Yes, yes. Ponies are usually 10 years less than what they actually are.
Yep.
And horses,
Yep.
it's a hit
Exactly.
and miss. I had one that lived, okay. Around here, everything seems to live nearly forever. So, so with the introduction, I do actually introduce Blue Duck as being 31 before I tell you that he's a gelding or that he's a Marsh Tacky or that he's Grula. But the reason I say it is because I'm still absolutely blown away that he's 31 and he looks
Yep.
maybe 20.
Yep.
That's what blows me away about his age. But also at the same time, we started the foundation around him because at 30, no one wanted to pick up whatever pieces he might have and continue on. At the same time, he looked so good, no one wanted to let him go.
Yep. So he's caught
So,
between a rock and a hard place.
and we didn't feel that that was right for a rare breed to have a horse kind of hanging out there going, I have no safety net,
Yep.
you know?
Truth. Good for you.
Thank
So
you.
that's the point. Uh, if this is Rudy, one of my rescues, and
Mhm.
he's 27 this year, and here he is. Normally we introduce. This is Rudy, and he's 27. But really, we ought to talk about he's living his best life. He was rescued. He's all those things. Let's change the narrative just a little bit. That age is not. But I do agree. When you have an older horse and you've poured a lot of effort and time into it, you're pretty proud of it, and that's good too. But there comes a point at which even when it's an older horse and it's in great shape, and this horse is a very good example. I was at a friend's house and we were drinking coffee on the porch, and this is one of her boarders, and her boarder's horse walked out, was eating grazing, those kind of things. And then I noticed the way she was walking, and I pulled out my phone. This horse is having some challenges, whether it's neurologic or whatever. It appeared to me that she was trying to lay down and she was having some concerns for going down. And these people, you see, they've got all the head things on her. They get her teeth done. They get all the vets there doing all the things, right? And what's really interesting is if it's under vet care, nobody else is going to do anything about it. If you call animal control and the horse is under vet's care, there's nothing even animal control can do, right? But I
Hmm.
took the tack of, hey, I don't know who your friend is, but she's welcome to call me. I'm a little worried that your horse is going to the point where we need to make a decision. And I always tell people that, it's better a year, a month, a week, a day too early than even 1 minute too late. And we don't want to get this horse to it's a minute too late because she's having problems getting down. She's going to have more problems getting up. And one of these days she's going to go down. She's not going to be able to get up, and then they do all the things that horses do when they panic because they can't get up. Their instinct says get up, and they hurt themselves. We don't want her to do that, and we don't want that to be her very last day, and we don't want her,
Hmm.
the person that owns her, to know that that was her last day. So we emphasize a lot the quality of life assessments, and I know the rescue does a lot of this kind of stuff, right? You're doing it with whiskey. You know, it goes well beyond the eating and drinking and ambulation where it's able to walk around and eat and drink. A lot of people say, well, he's still eating and drinking. And well, wouldn't you? I mean, you're driven to do that. Your instincts do that. If you get to the point where you're not eating and drinking, you're way too far, right? Um, so we also think about play and exploration and social engagement. Are they doing their normal behaviors? Are they playing in the pasture? Are they being friends? Do they still nibble on their friends? They stay with the herd. When a horse stops doing some of those things, that's telling you too, right? There's something going wrong. Usually it's pain. Sometimes it may be another disease process that's affecting them. We have some hashtags. We talk a lot about friends, freedom, and forage. That's based on older horses particularly should be out 24/7 in a pasture somewhere so that they don't get locked up in being in a stall. And as an older person, I can tell you the more I sit here doing this, when I get up from this webinar, I'm going to be all locked up, right? So lubrication comes from movement. And then, freedom from pain, injury, disease, fear, distress, and discomfort, which is the 5 freedoms that we talk about in welfare. On some of these slides, I have put the information that some of you may be interested in going and looking up. You can do some Googling and find those references and read them if you want to go into a lot more detail on the scientific side. And then care is not welfare. So I see many, many beautiful horses. I was just up at Saratoga last week helping with the barn fire situation. Beautiful horses, and they're standing in stalls 24/7, and they get out to be walked in the thing, and then they get run one time on the track every day, and they go right back in that stall, and they have so many stereotypies, and they're beautiful horses, but they don't have good welfare, and I know it. Other people should know it. We're getting better about seeing those things. We got to stop worrying about the how much supplements and brushing does he get versus how much does he get out with his friends and get, yeah, he gets bit, yeah, he gets kicked at, and once in a while he gets some sunburn. And that's the way horses want to live, is with their friends. So we're going to talk tonight about making decisions. And the first one we're going to talk about is found dead and unexpected loss. Then we'll talk about emergencies where the animal is painful or suffering and understanding what suffering is. Then we're going to talk about their decreasing ability to cope. That usually comes with aging, but that may not always be. Sometimes it's a disease process. Their increasing pain and mobility issues also may be associated with aging, but also could be a disease process or an injury. And then, of course, your ultimate decision, which is if you get sick to the point where you can't take care of your animals or you die, and your increasing inability to care properly for horses. We see this a lot in rescue. We see it with founder syndrome for many of these horse rescues, and we have to deal with it. So what is quality of life for a horse? I'm going to show you a video. This is my horses. They're all running down and across the pastures. And then Torque takes off to be with his friends. And I think those horses are feeling pretty darn good. There's the 27-year-old kicking his heels up, about run over the thing, running and having fun and farting and bucking and doing all those things as a friend, right? That's what we want to see. And I go to people's houses sometimes and they've got the horse out there and they love it. And I say, when was the last time he trotted? And they go, oh, well, he can't trot very much anymore. His feet are sore. At that point, we got to start making some decisions for the welfare of the horse. This is what horses should be doing, out there with their friends doing their thing. And the other reason we're talking about this tonight is some of you that know me know that I'm very passionate about speaking up for veterinarians, because sometimes veterinarians, because of their oath and some other challenges, can't really speak up for themselves. And this is my veterinarian that works with my horses, Dr. Jennifer Proctor, and she is wonderful. She's also a photographer. She's taken some of my wonderful pictures for me. And she's known Torque since I got here 15 years ago. So she knows Torque very well. She prides herself on doing a lot of liberty work with my horses, giving them their shots and doing the things. She's over at least twice a year, and sadly, every once in a while we have some other issue, and I see her more often than that. But she loves my horses too, right? I mean, you meet a horse 3 or 4 times a year for 15 years along. I defy you to not care about it, right? Vets have huge hearts. That's why they got into veterinary medicine, right? And your vet sees way too many horses where they're thinking, man, I wish these people would put this down. And they try gently to encourage you to make a decision and all those things. And people just, they don't want to see it. They can't see it. And I end up talking to veterinarians and friends of mine that are dealing with, hey, I got a client that's got a horse that's really, and sometimes I'm the one that makes the phone call. It's a friend of mine and say, hey, I was just talking to your vet, and your vet is really worried about your horse. What's going on with your horse? Talk them down off the ledge, right? And I don't mind doing that. People want an opinion. Opinions like buttholes. Everybody has one, and mine is big, apparently. I will talk to you about those kind of things. Just call me, email me, send me some pictures, send me some videos. I'll help you work through it. I'm not a veterinarian. For those of you that don't know, I'm a vet tech. Alexa, stop. Really? That was my reminder. Anyway, uh, so the problem is that veterinarians are killing themselves at 4 times the rate of the regular population because they are people with huge hearts, because they care very much about their clients, but they're also in huge financial distress. It means they also have tendencies towards blackmail and bullying online. All this social media thing is just crazy. And then, of course, when you call them and you've been walking your horse, quote, since yesterday, and now you finally call them out at 2 a.m. and you expect them to be there 5 minutes later, and then you want to cuss at them because they say, well, I'll be there in 2 hours, but I got to get up, crank the truck, put some clothes on, and drive to you, you know, it wears on the soul. I hear these things all the time. And I have veterinarians that call me in the middle of the night and want to talk about these kinds of things. I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. I will talk to anybody that's thinking about killing themselves. I do not want you to kill yourself, right? It is not worth it. But that's what happens. And we lose them way too often. I've lost many friends, and we don't want to keep doing that. So take good care of your veterinarian. If you haven't looked around, there's not a lot of them, and there's less and less coming out of vet school, especially to take care of horses. And decision point, found dead. That's our first one, right? What do we do? Well, there's not much decision to make at this point, thank goodness, but there's still some things that we need to think about. So we find dead, how are we going to handle carcass disposal, especially if you find them dead and there was no implication that this was going to happen. What are the financial impacts? Is the animal insured? If it's an insured animal, you got all kinds of phone calls to make and probably should not move the body until the vet comes out and looks at it and those kind of things. And obviously notifying those that care, your kids, your whoever used to own the horse that loved it, those kind of things. And allow yourself to grieve the loss and allow the other horses to grieve the loss. Because the loss is a thing. And this is one of my friends and his horse, Sparky, who I knew many, many years ago, and she finally was found dead at 30 years old. She had a wonderful life. She lived on the pasture with all her friends. And this is my friend Mark and his daughter. She's special needs, and she's a wonderful, high-functioning child. But this is the first time she's been this close to death. And so they are working through it. She's 12 years old. They're working through all the things and giving her time to process the loss. It doesn't matter if you're an adult or a child. It's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. So next decision point is this is the one that gets a lot of people. Emergency. We weren't planning for it. All of a sudden there's a pasture incident, colic or laminitis, falls out of the back of the trailer, whatever, right? Let's please not let them fall out of the back of the trailer. And they're suffering for whatever reason. And we need to make some decisions. We can't be screwing around. We got to contact the vet. We need to, get that animal on a trailer, or the vet's coming to us to get definitive care or euthanasia, whatever's going to happen. But we can't be messing around. It's amazing to me how many people will walk out, the horse is colicking, rolling in the pasture. They'll come back in the house, change clothes, put on some makeup, do whatever, and it's like, hello, what are you doing, right? This is emergency. This animal is suffering. They can feel pain just like you. And get the vet involved, make those decisions. If you're going to do surgery, if you're going to got the money to spend for surgery, what kind of surgery, and then what is the pain management for that animal if you're going to deal with the injury, and how much is going to cost us. And you don't have to put yourself into a financial ruin for your horse. I'm going to tell you right now, you are good to go. If you make that hard decision and consider immediate euthanasia, I'm going to say you're okay. Now, there's some times when I would think, holy crap, there's nothing that can survive that. He did perfectly fine. Veterinarians love these kinds of injuries because they look absolutely god awful, And they sew him up. Now, this horse is going to be scarred probably for the rest of his life. And he may, if it was a performance horse, he might have some challenges with some of the performance that he was going to make to do. But in general, they heal up really well. But that's not always true. So they get hit by a car, or they have a pasture incident, trailer accident, they live through a barn fire, they get out of that. At some point, I deal a lot with barn fires, especially right now. I'm on that committee in Saratoga, and you know, you pull a horse that's worth $1 million out of a barn fire, and he can't breathe. He's an athlete. If he can't breathe
Yep.
and he doesn't have any future, then somebody's gonna have to make a hard decision. And I totally understand that for financial reasons, right? And whether we like it or not, some horses are a asset, and we have to make asset decisions for those kinds of things, right? And then, of course, return to expected use. And the big thing here is some people can only afford one horse. So if your horse gets hurt and you are running 1Ds on your barrels, or you're at the top of your show game and you really want to get to the world championships, and along the way your horse gets hurt, now what? Now your horse is injured and probably not going to be able to go to those things. And how are you going to deal with that, right? That's a hard decision. Some people just can't afford to having that second horse for lots of good reasons, right? So we encourage people to have a plan. And this is an example of my personal plan, right? This is Torque. Get home. He had had his vaccines in the morning, and I get home, and he's gassy. I mean, you can actually see him farting right there. He's uncomfortable. He's looking at his belly. You can see he's breathing hard. He just looks miserable, right? So I took this short video, I sent it to my vet, I took his temperature, which really wasn't hard to do because he was laying down. Um, and she said, load him up, give him 10 cc's of Banamine now, and then load him up and bring him to me. And of course, it takes me about at least 30 minutes to get there, right? You don't just give Banamine before you call the vet. You call the vet and you have a VCPR, which is your veterinary client patient relationship with your vet, and you tell them, hey, this is what's going on. What should I do? There's a lot of horse people who really screw that up. And it shows the vet you don't give a crap about their opinion, right? So call them, give the information, give them the TPRs. If you don't know how to TPRs, if you're not a horseman, you need to go learn how to do that. Temperature, pulse, and respirations, right? And send that in, right? It cost me a little bit of money. He had to spend some time at the vets for observation, but he was fine the next morning. And she had given him some drugs to keep him from becoming laminated. Thank goodness, right? So that's called having a plan. Having a truck, having a trailer, being willing to load that horse up, get him there, do all the things that it takes to do that. If not, put a bullet in his head. And I know that sounds mean, but letting him lay there in the pasture for another couple hours and then finally getting around to it at 2 a.m. is just that. You should go to jail for that, right? That's a welfare thing, right? That horse depends on you. Okay, immediate euthanasia. When we talk about killing horses, there are some things that the AAP, which is this group down here, the American Association for the Equine Practitioners, that's your horse vets, they have guidelines on what euthanasia. And then there's guidelines for the AVMA, which is the American Veterinary Medical Association for euthanasia of animals. And generally, even if you're a veterinarian and you get there and you look at a horse that has really bad prognosis for really bad injuries or multiple injuries after you've examined it, severe injuries, multiple organ systems involved, he's in shock, he's had a lot of blood loss, amputations, eviscerations, were done, unresponsive to chronic pain management. So even your little pasture pony that everybody loves and says, well, I just give him some Banamine once in a while, that ain't cool, folks. That's pain, right? So if you have to give him some stuff all the time, or Equiox or whatever, that he's in pain. So we got to do something about it, or treat it, or do something about it permanently. And then, of course, the dangerously combative, aggressive to responders. That's often neurologic. It might be West Nile, it might be rabies, it might be some really scary things. And dangerously combative and aggressive is too dangerous for in a lot of situations. So we make hard decisions for those horses too. They can fall on you, they can attack you. There's lots of things that can happen. So now we get into some of the tougher ones, right? The slow decline of many horses over many, many years is really hard for people to see, right? And I always tell people, you've got this $1,000 device in your pocket all the time. Oh, it's funny. It won't show up on the computer. Isn't that funny? $1,000 device that shows that you spent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use the dang thing to look back at your Facebook 5 years ago, 10 years ago of your horse. Hopefully you take pictures and video of your horse once in a while when you're riding him. Go look at those pictures in your memories from 5 years ago. And then look at your horse out there in the pasture and say, man, doesn't look like the same horse, right? Or, hey, he looks great. He looks just like he did 5 years ago. Yay. But that slow decline gets people, right? So don't be afraid. You know the horse is 27. You know the horse is 30. Have those hard decisions now when he looks great. Hey, doc, what am I really looking for? What do I need to look for in my horse as he ages to make sure that I'm not doing the wrong thing? I don't want to cross into cruelty, right? Um, what kind of pain, what does pain look like? How do I determine pain in my horse? What are some long-term options? My horse has got PPID or he's got EMS or he's got whatever. Does he really want to spend the rest of his life with a freaking thing on his nose so he can't eat grass? He's a horse. He wants to eat grass, right? What are our better options, right? There's got to be something better instead of just doing that. The other thing I hate is those stupid things on their necks for chewing the wood and cribbing. It's abusive. It's horrific. And the companies will sell them to you all day long. And horse people think that's perfectly okay. It's not okay. Ask the scientists, they'll tell you from a welfare perspective. So failures to make those decisions over time and failure to understand what's really going on with a horse means that, this one happens to be in Gray, Georgia, where I live, and I had seen this horse a long way away from the fence, but finally I drove by one day and I saw him walking, well, crippling along here, and I stopped in time to catch this with my phone. I don't know if you can see, but his little hooves are all torn up. He has crippling laminitis, chronic laminitis. He is suffering. His hay and his water is a couple 100 yards away. So he has to walk between his hay and his water. It's horrific. It's horrific. If you've ever had a little plantar fasciitis, I have it right now. There are times when if you threatened to beat me with a stick, I wouldn't be able to run across the house, right? So don't do that. Don't fail to make that decision. Because really at this point, once I took this video, I called animal control because now I got video proof and now I'm going to push hard to make a good decision for this horse, which they finally did. It's just sad that it took them that long to make that decision. So emotional distress is not for the horse. The emotional distress is for us. And these are just a few of the questions that I deal with when I'm talking to people about these things. And they'll come up and they'll tell me these, and I always love to hear people's stories. And they'll tell me, "Oh my God, I'm afraid the girls at the barn are going to judge me because I put my horse down. He was only 25. I mean, maybe he could make it to 30." And I go, "Well, there's lots of reasons, and it's your horse, and you're making the decision, and you're working together with a vet, so what's the problem?" They're like, "I just don't want the girls at the barn to be mad at me or judge me." Well, that's part of humans, right? So we have to get bigger girl panties and put them on and deal with what we got to deal with, right? Or go find a therapist that can help you work through those kind of things. It's not fair to make the horse be your therapist, right? Horses don't die naturally. That rarely ever happens. A lot of pain is in horses that we look at every day and people can't see it. Learn what is pain in horses. That's not really the thing for this evening, but I encourage you to look up what is pain face in horses. What happens if the euthanasia procedure goes wrong? People always tell me the stories, and I go, well, hopefully you get a veterinarian that knows what they're doing or a shooter that knows what they're doing, and it should be instantaneous, right? We're going to show you some videos of those things for those of you that stay long enough on the webinar at the very end. And I will warn you before we get to that because I know some people are goofy about it. And somehow have I failed my horse? Can I give it to some cute little girl? I am the person when I was 18 and I was going off to college who was talked into giving my horse to the cute little girl next door. Then I came home 6 months later and they had dog fennel in the pasture and that horse had lost probably 200 pounds. I took him back and I didn't get in trouble, thank goodness. I think they were glad to get rid of it. But don't do that. Fortunately, he did survive another 3 years, but it took a lot of effort and time to get some weight back on him. And It was just awful. So it turns out that the grief counselors, when I started looking at all these things and why is this such a big thing for people, it turns out the grief counselors know what this is. It's called anticipatory grief. You have it for yourself. You know you're going to die someday, right? Well, we know that if you have pets, you're going to lose them someday. You're going to outlive them, I hope, right? And if you're not, maybe you need to think about some of those decisions too. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, anticipatory grief. This is my best positive example of emotional distress. This was my distress because my father, who I have since lost since this picture, he was 88, and his horse there is 30 years old, named Georgie Porgy, and they have been together for 25 years. And he loves his horse and has done all kinds of massive, amazing. I didn't think an old man could learn to do liberty work, but he was doing liberty work with his horse. Very proud of him. Worked with him several times a day. Wonderful relationship. So they get some work done on his teeth because he's old. And the horse ends up having an abscess on the lower jaw. And it works down through the skin and it makes this big, nasty, huge abscess. And it finally blows. It was all hot and stuff. It finally blows, which is good. It stunk and all those things. So the vet comes back out and says, hey, you need to give these pills. You need to wipe that thing out a couple times a day and all these things. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my father's 88. What the hell? How is he going to do this? This is never going to work. How is he going to give these pills? The horse is never going to eat the pills. I don't know. Whatever. What do I know? The horse ate the pills. My dad's out there 3 times a day. So this is a video of my father's solution to the problem. And, oh, come on, video. He waits till he lays down to go take a nap, and he's used to my dad and a fly spray bottle, and my dad just goes out there and wipes it and cleans it and does all this stuff a couple times a day. Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? Here's the same horse later in the same day, perfectly fine, doing the things. Apparently, I did not need to worry, right? So sometimes the point is the emotional part was when I was here in Georgia and my dad's in Tennessee and he's telling me all these things and I finally just got up in the truck and went out there to see what the heck was going on. Obviously, there's no problem. But in my mind, there was a huge problem, right? There you go. So emotional distress for horses is very different than it is for people. You know, why am I being taken away from my home farm? You know, where's my friends? Why are you taking me away? Now I've got to have my eye treated, or I've got to have my hooves done, and I've got to stay at the vet clinic or at the vet school for a couple days or a week or whatever. I don't know what my new routine is, all these weird situations. They're poking and prodding at me. I hurt. I'm depressed. I'm without my friends. That's what emotional distress is for horses. It's very different from us. They don't understand euthanasia. They don't understand. I've walked up to horses to have to shoot them. They don't recognize a gun. They don't know what you're going to do if you do it correctly, right? And when the veterinarian comes with they may be afraid of the needle simply because they're needle shy, but they're not going to be afraid of the needle because they go, oh my God, I'm going to be killed. Today is my last day on earth. They don't understand that. Thank goodness. Think about how different our lives would be if we didn't think about that all the time. And the older I get, the more I think about it, right? Self-talk will get you. So another decision point. That same situation, and it gets worse. We've got increasing pain. We're starting to have huge mobility issues where the animal can't move around normally, do those kind of things. We got to get veterinary treatment and veterinary advice. We got to start looking at these long-term options. Pain management is usually involved in these kind of things. You need to talk to your veterinarian and be serious and come up with a long-term plan. What are we talking about? 6 months of giving this drug, crushing these pills, even PPID medication. I had one of my horses on it, and it worked great for the first 3 weeks because I could just shove it in an apple, and he would take the apple. After 3 weeks, he said, nope, there's something funny in that apple, and I'm not going to eat it. So then I had to do all the things that I saw other people having to do to try to get their PPID medication in them, right? And at some point, the horse says, you know what? It's not worth eating. So then he starts losing weight because he refuses to eat, right? Just all the management challenges that we run into. but don't cross that line into cruelty. That's the biggest thing. And that's how I got into this whole thing about talking about euthanasia and planning death and all that. Is in my normal life, I talk about technical large animal emergency rescue and using slings and getting animals out of various things and supporting their weight and that kind of stuff. So these are some horses in those kinds of situations. And it really came down to now we have a lot of technologies. We've come a long way in the last 30 or 40 years. But just because you can, would you and should you? So if this horse has to be lifted like this horse does, these are examples of farriery for horses that are bilaterally lame or very, very sore on their feet. And so it's not fair to lift one foot and force them to put all the weight on the other foot because it's really painful on the other foot. So what they do is they put it in a sling, and many times horses aren't dumb. Many of these horses get used to it and they're like, oh my God, this is so nice. I don't have my weight on my feet, right? But how long can you really do that? Are you going to do that every 6 weeks to get them trimmed? Many of these horses have to be trimmed every 3 weeks. Are you really going to put a sling on them and get the vet there and sedate them and do all these things every 3 weeks? At some point, we have to say, should I? And I'm not the expert on when that should be, but you should talk to your veterinarian about it because we've seen people go way too far with some of these things just because we can. This is the other thing. I said something about that euthanasia can also be a gift to yourself. This is what I see way too much of. I see people who basically pull themselves out of their normal life to be able to try to save their horse. And this typically is the ones that only have one horse, but that's not always true. Sometimes it's a person who owns a rescue and that one horse they're really attached to, and they literally go crazy. They lose their mind. They have all kinds of mental health challenges with these kinds of things. And some of the things that you will see is a lot of guilt, frustration, anger, stress, and anxiety in that person. But you'll also see them the bills start mounting up. They don't have enough to cover the bills. They start asking for money. You start noticing that you never see them. They're spending all their time on the horse. Their friends and family start to walk away because they start saying, they've been trying to tell them, hey, there's problems, and they're not listening. So at some point, you can only open your mouth and say something for so long. You'll see them stop taking showers. You'll see them not care for themselves. And obviously, in many cases, some of these people are not physically capable of taking care of the horse. So we see them going to care for the horse, but they're not really doing what they need to do, and the horse is suffering because of it. That's a really hard, tough one, right? We don't want to put ourselves into that, and we don't want to push ourselves to the point of financial distress. There comes a point at which you say, no more. We've tried, we've done all these great things. These happen to be horses that were saved. This one is a rescue that was obviously extremely emaciated. And this one had some other injury. I don't remember what this deal was, but they managed to save that horse. Had to spend a couple days in a sling. She's being loaded into a trailer for transport. And but at some point, when do you say no more? If you've got a whole team of people, that's easy. If it's just you, or it's just you and your husband or your wife, that becomes a little bit tougher. So now let's really talk about the tough one. So we're all going to die someday. We never know when that would be. I don't want to know what day I'm going to die because it would change the way I live my life, right? So at some point, your illness, your death, your increasing inability to care for horses properly due to mobility issues and those kind of things, thinking about who takes your horses, who is going to really want your horses. I mean, this is different if you own thoroughbreds that are on the racetrack and they're valuable, but for a lot of people, they're just like mine. I love my horses. They're worth $1 million to me, but they're all at least 23 and they have some issues and they're wonderful with people, but nobody really wants my horses at 23 years old, right? So if you're in your 50s, your 60s, and your 70s and you're still breeding horses, I gotta wonder what's wrong with you. I mean, that's that's not doing the math. Because to me, my horses, when I have bred a couple horses over the years, and they have lived with me their whole life. I still have one out there in my pasture right now, Angel. She's still with me, and I bred her mama, and I had her and her brother, and I still have her. and she will be here until the day she's gone, right? But a horse can live 30 years. If you're in your 70s and you're still breeding horses like some crazy ass breeders do, Joan Brown here in Jones County, 85 years old and still breeding horses, are you crazy? Do the math. So, there are some ways that you find out that someone has died and given you a horse, and this is not the way that's preferable to find it out. This is a friend of mine. She died, and after she was dead, her husband wrote to me and said, "Hey, I want to give you Rio." I was gracious. I got on a plane. I went out to Oklahoma City. I went to meet Rio. I'd never met him before. Talked to the husband, talked him off the ledge, and said, "Listen, he's out here with his buddy. You should keep him with his buddy." And they were both in their late 20s. Keep him with his buddy for the next couple of years. They can't live forever. Give him a wonderful end, and that's fine with me. And he was good with that. So, yay. Doesn't always happen that way. And not everybody can afford to go get on a plane either and go see this situation in person. So when it comes down to euthanasia planning considerations, I want you guys to think about all the things that are attached to it. It's not just the euthanasia, it's the coordination with the veterinarian, especially if you're making an elective decision, but also if you're trying to get them because there's an emergency, right? Do you want to let people come say goodbye? I'm going to tell you, I've seen some really complicated things. Your friends get there and they go, he looks pretty damn good. Why are you putting him down? Mm-mm. If my horses go down, my husband and I make that decision, and he is going to go down, and you will see it on Facebook. And I will call the people that he loved or loved him and say, hey, I'm sorry, but we had to put Tornado down today, right? Because I don't want to have to deal with all that uh, guessing and silliness, right? What mementos do you want? If you want the priest to come by and do a prayer, that's great too. If you're going to do social media posts, if you're going to do whatever, have you guys seen what's behind me? That's a friend of mine posted that. That's her horse. She bought a bunch of flowers and wrapped them around her horse and took a very artistic photo. I thought that was beautiful. I'm using it for my background, right? Whatever your thing is. And then, of course, the carcass and the insurance and the legal. If you've got more than one owner, your daughter owns it too, or whatever, you better make sure you're making some phone calls because if you go euthanize it and then you start the war of the family, right? Anyway, once it's dead, that's really not as complicated. Although the other day, a girlfriend of mine had a horse that had to be put down, and she was having a problem. It was 95 degrees, and she could not find somebody in the middle of the day to come bury her horse. So we made some phone calls all around, and we finally found somebody. But she was just really worried that now he's dead, and it's 95 degrees. Eventually, we're going to have some problems, right? So are you going to compost it? Are you going to cremate it? If you're going to cremate it, you need to contact the people that do that. Are you going to bury it? If you're going to bury it, folks, you got to have a big hole. All right. Horses should go at least 8 feet in the ground. That's not a tractor depth. That is a backhoe depth. So put it in there and make sure that you backfill that well and mark the area so that you don't have problems with destabilized soil. And then transporting it. I do this, I have a rescue glide. I move bodies on I don't want to drag something along the dirt. So I use a rescue glide, cover it with a tarp. It's much kinder to the person that's watching. That's their last vision of their horse, and I want to do it in a professional manner. And there's so many ways to remember your horse, whether it's, some hair on pottery or jewelry made with your ashes or that's ashes for a horse. There's about 15 pounds of them. This girlfriend, she made a big rock cairn over her horse. That was lovely. Photos. This is the skin off of one of my horses. I actually had him skinned. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm a scientist and I'm an educator. So I use that skin all the time teaching kids, and you can't believe how big the skin on a horse is. And then jewelry and those kind of things. Whatever your thing is, as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or whatever, you know, plan for it because it's probably going to take some time, effort, and money. It cost, that was 2004, that cost $800 to get that hide scan tanned. So a lot of this comes down to, okay, we've made our decision, we're going to do this. So similar to the Chocolate Smiles program, if you go to your vet, you'll see the little chocolate thing on the thing, and they'll say, sometimes they'll have a sign and say, hey, please be quiet. Someone's having a hard day with their last day with their pet. Um, all the chocolate they want. For horses, it's all the molasses covered sweet feed they want. And I hope your horse is not so sick that he can't eat it, because that's what is the greatest thing in the world. You put that down in front of a horse and give him that with some extra, and they are just like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. They have no
Mhm.
idea. Or you let them out on the fresh grass that they're never allowed to graze because they're in EMS or PPID or whatever, and take your chairs out in the pasture, let them eat all the grass they want, and just watch them, right? To us, we call it the October decision. If you're up north, they call it the October decision because they can't dig in the ground after the permafrost. So they have to make those decisions. Otherwise, the horse dies and it lays out there in the yard until spring comes, and that's awful, right? For a lot of people, that's a very emotional thing. And then, are you going to coordinate the herd being with them? Who's going to be with them? The veterinarian? Are you trailering them away or whatever? There is a lot more veterinarians these days, guys, that specialize in home euthanasias for dogs, for cats, for horses. And for some of the retired veterinarians, that's what they do, right? They go out and help people with the euthanasia decisions to do those things. And this is a good example. This is my girlfriend had Luke, and Luke has sarcoma. You can see it in this picture right here on his knee, and he's not going to survive that. It's not going to get better. He's an older horse. She can afford any kind of surgery or cancer treatment and all the things that some rich people can afford. So I said, well, why don't you bring him over and we'll let him eat all the grass he wants, and then I'll meet the vet the next morning at my place and we'll put him in my compost pile. And she said, that'd be great. So this is Luke on his last night. He's eating grass. We're out there. We had dinner. I brought some bottles of wine. We sat out there and watched that, and it was quite a lovely evening. He was sniffing poop and talking to my horses across the. I don't care if he's talking across the fence with the other horses. Who cares? He's going to die tomorrow. If he gets some kind of disease, who cares, right? So we did all the right things, and it was wonderful. So um, when we talk about death, I want you guys to understand that euthanasia literally means a good death. And I hope that for all of us. I hope that my dad died with of an aneurysm and he was not aware of it. And when he realized he had it, he was at the hospital, he made the decision, hey, I don't want you to crack my chest, just give me some good drugs, give me some oxygen, and let me fade away. And 6 hours later, he was gone. No pain, no distress. And I got to call him, talk to him, and he was laughing and joking and doing all the things. I mean, that is the way to go. He was driving his tractor and feeding his cows that morning. Everybody wants to go that way. But sadly, humans and horses, that's not the way most of us are going to go. It's going to be awful, right? So, humane methods render the animal instantly unaware of what's going on, um, and little pain and distress as possible. So, that's what we're looking for. And this is Tornado. This is my horse Tornado. And we euthanized him. That's Dr. Jennifer Proctor. She used the brand new method that I'm going to highly recommend to you guys. It's called the interthecal lidocaine method. Um, and my herd was there, and they're coming by to see what's going on with Tornado, and is he gone? Give him time. Give him grace. It takes them some time. This horse is processing. His buddy from many, many years has been put down in the. They euthanized him. They let him talk to the horse while he's that. Then they put the horse down in the hole, and he's still looking for him. Give him time. Give him grace. Grant grace to yourself. Give yourself time. I put Tornado down 2 years ago, and it's still tough. You love them, you should cry. You should do the things that it takes. Talking about this is tough for me, but I think it's important enough to be able to cry in public. Right? Give yourself time, grant them grace. Some horses, they walk up, they sniff, and they walk off like, oh, well, guess he's dead. And some horses will stand there for hours. You never know what your horses will do. Give them time. It's amazing how often, Patricia, that we're in a hurry to get him in the hole, And it's like, come on, let him say goodbye.
Hmm.
So
That's
this is a
always important.
yes,
Ever since ever since I grew up and had horses, like, it feels like this is my second time around having them. We've always let them congregate, find out what's going on, just and go through that process. And it's much better for your herd afterwards. It's
yes.
there's not that
Constant
panicking.
screaming and panicking,
Yeah.
like, where are they?
Mm-hmm.
I remember a friend of mine, she hauled her horse off and it had to be euthanized somewhere else. And then she made the hard decision to get it sent to the crematorium from there. And so her herd never got to see it come back. And his friend would stand out there in the pasture and just call and look where he'd last seen that trailer. And I said, I will never, even if I have to euthanize it somewhere else, I will bring him back and lay him
Mm-hmm.
down here with his friends because it was so awful watching that horse cry for
Oh
his
yeah.
friend.
Yeah,
Not
they
all of them
don't.
care, but some of them care, and you never know who's going to care.
You don't.
So,
And then, oh goodness,
oh
you just,
goodness.
it's just, it's not good on anyone
Yeah.
when you don't know that's the way they're going to be.
So, Dr. McGreevy over in Australia, he's one of my I just look up to this man. He's done so much for welfare in horses. And he said the unquestionable value of planning end of life decisions for animals lies chiefly in its ability to avoid extending suffering. I mean, that's a gift. We can't do it for our mama or our kid that's suffering from some disease, but we can do it for our animals. It is a true gift, and we need to treat it as such. So, at this point, that is the end of the presentation. I am going to now talk about actual euthanasia, and there are videos and pictures that are very hard for some people to look at. So if you drop off, I totally understand. But I want you guys to understand what euthanasia really is. Changing the way that we humans think is a painful process. And I'm not a salesperson, but I'm going to try to sell you guys on the new method of doing euthanasia and asking your veterinarian to do it because it's going to be better for you, it's going to be better for them, it's going to be better for your horse. So let's talk about it. The actual methods of equine euthanasia that we use for horses are these methods. There's actually 5. Lethal injection is what we all grew up doing with our, dogs, cats, horses, using a barbiturate and potassium chloride that we call euthanasia solution. There's a new method that I'm going to show you guys. It's called intrathecal lidocaine injection, and it's only done by a veterinarian, and it has to be in an anesthetized horse, and it goes through the atlanto-occipital space. And then a gunshot wound to the head. Correct landmarks and caliber. Your horse never knows. If it's done right, it should be one shot, one kill, and it's instantaneous. And we're going to talk about that. There are some less common humane choices that can be made if the horse is in other situations and you have other equipment. Captive bolts are not real common for the average person. Bleeding is one of those things that if the animal's already unconscious, you can do that. But I promise you, there's a lot of blood in a horse, and that's not fun. It's one of those things that you might have to do if the horse has an accident on the trail, breaks a leg, or is in a position that he can't get out, and you had to make that very hard decision. But we don't ever want to really do those things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you like the best euthanasia you'll ever see with pentobarbital. That's the drug that we've been using for years. This is a veterinarian who was gracious enough to let me video this procedure. She's going to put a catheter in the horse's jugular vein. The horse is pre-sedated. In other words, she's feeling loopy. She gets it into the jugular vein. You can see the blood dripping out there. And then she's going to push the drugs. The drugs, in this case, we call it the pink juice. 2 big boluses of barbiturate with a potassium salt that will stop the heart. The barbiturate makes the brain go to sleep, and the potassium salt stops the heart. She starts to chew a little bit. You're going to see her balance herself. So obviously she's feeling pretty loopy. The veterinarian knows she's got about 30 seconds to a minute to finish the second bolus. The drug is really thick and hard to push. The horse is actually thinking about going down already. She's losing brain control. Horse goes down, lays over on her side. The brain is already gone. And at this point, we're waiting for the heart to stop, which might take a couple minutes, right? And your vet will check to do that. That is the best I've ever seen one of those procedures go. And I'm a vet tech. I've watched things go really, really wrong. I've watched things go pretty right, but that one was the best ever. I couldn't believe that I was videotaping it. So the owner picked a very good last day. She made that choice, and the best thing is she was gracious enough to allow us to do. That's a bunch of my students back there, and she was gracious enough to allow us to do a necropsy so that those young vet students could learn more about anatomy and physiology of horses. So it went all to a good cause. Thank her for doing that. That's tough. I know that Ginger just did that with Mercy last year, and it was a learning experience for everybody. You can't, not everybody can do that, but if you are in the position to be able to do such a thing, and where other people can learn, whether it's vets or vet students or farriers, body workers, that's a fantastic way to learn about anatomy and physiology. So let's talk about the second method, which is going to require anesthesia in the horse first. And anesthesia makes the brain go to sleep. So this is one of my veterinarian friends, and she's going to lay this horse down with the drugs for anesthesia. Notice she's wearing a helmet. She knows how dangerous that a 1,000-pound animal wobbling around on its legs can be. She's trying to push that shoulder over so that the horse goes over. Once the head goes, the rest of the body goes. At this point, the horse is anesthetized and unable to understand what's going on around them, right? At this point, this is similar to the procedure in women that have ever had children, where they use lidocaine in the other end of your spine to make sure that you don't feel it when you're having children, which I think is cheating personally, but I never had kids, so there you go. They call that an epidural. This is basically an epidural, but it's at this end of the horse, close to the between the brain and the spinal cord. So when they inject that lidocaine there, it interferes with the rhythms of the breathing and the heart, and eventually they stop. So the horse is anesthetized, they cover the eye, they're going to take a big needle and push it into the spinal cord between those bones of the occipital. This is something that takes, that's a veterinarian that's learning this. She's never done it before. She's working with the vet tech that has done many of them. And what we're looking for is to finally get to the spine. One more push into the actual spinal cord. You'll see it sort of slip in. And then spinal cord, cerebrospinal fluid comes out, which tells you you're in the right spot. So between that atlanto-occipital space, between those two big bones, and getting the landmarks correct is the hard part. Once that happens, then she's going to push the lidocaine. It can stop breathing very quickly. It may take a few minutes. These procedures can take 5 or 10 minutes. Who cares? Tornado took about 3 minutes before he stopped breathing and his heart stopped. So he's anesthetized. He's not aware of anything. So he's blissfully unaware that he is slipping away. I think this is the way to go, folks, because guess what? The big thing I didn't tell you about pentobarbital is that it is a forever chemical, and it is showing up in our water. It's like PCBs and DDTs and all the other nasty chemicals that we are eating and drinking around us all the time. We got to stop putting that stuff into the environment. So talk to your veterinarian about the interthecal method, the new method of using lidocaine, and if they say, well, I don't like that, you know what that means? I'm just going to say it. And if there's any veterinarians watching, you know it's true. They don't know what they're doing and they're afraid to admit it. So tell them, hey, I will pay for you to go learn how to do that procedure so that you can do it for my horse. Or I'll find another veterinarian that is willing to do that procedure. That's where we're going, folks. Eventually, pentobarbital is going to get phased out because it's such a nasty chemical. We got to get better. All right. The last one that we're going to talk about tonight is the really tough one, and that is field euthanasia in horses. A lot of people are really goofy about this because they watch too many movies. And I'm going to tell you, having been in a position where I've had to shoot several horses myself, not mine, thank goodness, but other people's that have been in horrific situations. And I've trained my husband to do it because sometimes I'm out of town and somebody has a problem. He's 18 for 18, one shot, one kill. So that's what we want. We want to teach you how to do it correctly. There are websites with all the anatomical information, but I'm going to try to give you the basic information tonight. The big thing is the horse's brain is so much higher in the skull than most people imagine. It's way up there. It's almost between the ears. So you've got to get either the lateral canthus on the outside of the eye to the top of the ear, lateral canthus to the top of the ear. Most people don't know what the lateral canthus is. So what I tell people is the middle of the eye to the middle of the ear, middle of the eye to the middle of the ear, that cross and go an inch north. That's much easier. I've taught so many people to do this over the phone. Middle of the eye, middle of the ear. Make that cross. From the cross, go up about an inch, and you will get it on the brain. The other thing you can do is you can also feel the sutures. The sutures actually go from here up to that point and here up to that point. So you can, those are your three methods of finding the correct landmark. But I encourage you to download some of the information from Iowa State and take a look at that information. So y'all are thinking, oh my goodness, it's so awful to shoot a horse. I'm going to let this mare shoot this stallion. Watch this. Same exact spot. She is going to kill him deader than you can imagine. People have no idea how dangerous a horse kick is. Here she comes. Exact same spot that we're talking about shooting him. His anus opens up. He pooped. He peed. He goes into those weird movements that their legs make. His neck pulls back. His tongue hangs out. He is as dead as he will ever be. And she did that with one kick from one foot. Anyway, the point is it's instantaneous. It's instantaneous. If it's done right, you'll see some wiggling of the legs. It's done. It's instantaneous. This is a girlfriend of mine's horse, Golden. He had dropped a lot of weight, and the vet thought he had cancer, and she was gracious enough to let me come out and do this. I should have had on my shooting glasses, but can't do everything right. Done. He is done, folks. People freak a little bit about the wiggling. That is just your spinal cord doing what the spinal cord does. He is done. Whatever method you're going to use, I hope that this helped you tonight to understand that when it's done right, it's instantaneous. The horse is not aware, and he is in a better place in many cases. Obviously, confirmation of death is important. We want to make sure there's no heartbeat, no respiration. You can touch the cornea and the palpebral reflexes on the eye. I'm going to show you a video of that in a second. And then, of course, presence of rigor mortis. But we don't want any horses showing up in the yard the next day because somebody shot it and didn't know what they were doing, right? So this is an anesthetized horse. This is not a dead horse. This is an anesthetized horse for gelding. And the vet is checking the eye. It's blinking and winking. She's trying to manage his anesthesia level before she goes and takes his testicles off, right? You want to make sure he's anesthetized before you do that, okay? And then a dead eye. So this is a horse that's been shot and fixed and dilated pupil. It's bluish and dry almost immediately. No wink, no blink. It's amazing. The blood leaves the horse. The eye is no longer soft and liquid like it was, and that's what we're looking for. There's lots of resources that you can get if you run out of resources on this. This is a webinar series. Oh, this is a webinar series that I have for all kinds of things, from large animal rescue to um, you name it, all kinds of things. I invite you to go do that. If you have any questions, that's my email, that's my phone number, and you're welcome to call me at any time, or at least text me, and I will help you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys having me this evening.
Anytime. It's really important. And for a lot of horse owners, it's big and scary,
It
especially
is
if I
big and
haven't
scary.
done it.
If you don't know what's really coming and you hear all these crazy things from your friends, and so my goal is to make it more scientific and let you watch somebody else's horse being put down, and then maybe that'll make it a little bit easier for you. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
hosting me. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.